Case of child abuse seen in that city. Police found 3 boys in a western suburbs house, all in an extreme state of neglect. The boys were suffering from malnutrition, gangrene, rope burns, ulcers and urine burns. Cockroaches were found in one boy's nappy when he was taken to hospital for treatment. Tim Clucas reports on the case that's shocked the nation.
I was absolutely horrified. I've never seen anything so unbelievable in all my life. I had other police around me who were extremely upset, men who have been in the police force for many, many years in tears.
Not long after this interview, Detective Senior Constable Lola Scott was herself in tears. She broke down in Penrith Court as she described the condition of the abused children for a magistrate. The surprise and horror of the police has been echoed by everyone whose lives have been touched by this case. When you found out the full details of what had been going on, how did you feel?
Bloody disgusted, I'll tell you that. I just hope they never get any kids at all. It's terrible.
Does it hurt you to think that you were next door and could have done something if you'd known?
Sure does. You just don't know.
As a father, I'm just horrified that anybody's child could be subjected to this sort of treatment. It's not the sort of treatment you would mete out to an animal, let alone a human being. And I'm just extremely annoyed and upset, not only by the physical condition of the children, but by the fact that this situation could go on for so long without anybody in the neighbourhood, without relatives, without any authority, whether they be police, youth and community services, or whoever, detecting this brutality.
The full details of the case came to light on Saturday evening when fire gutted this Werrington home. Ironically, fire, so often a killer, was on this occasion a lifesaver.
The 4-year-old probably could thank whoever or whatever started the fire for saving his life.
Only when the ambulances arrived at hospital after the fire was the truth revealed. The burnt-out house had been occupied by a family of 6, not 4.
Well, my children have told me about kids in there tied up, but I just said, you know, don't tell tales and talk about other people, and didn't take any notice of them.
So how did you react when you found out that your kids had been telling the truth?
Oh, I was shocked. I couldn't believe it. You know, it's not something that you expect to find, you know, a few metres down from your own place.
I knew about Brett and Peter. I had heard there was a third one with the grandmother, but never seen him. And the other 2 were non-existent. Nobody had ever mentioned them.
So these people had 2 children that the whole neighbourhood didn't even know existed?
Nobody knew about them.
How did you feel when you heard what had been going on in that house?
Sick. To think that anybody could do that to any kids for any reason is just unbelievable.
The next morning we found out that what really happened to those kids, when we found out it had gangrene in that, and they'd been chained up to that back door for 2 years. It's dreadful. It's dreadful.
It's obviously hurting you thinking about it.
Yep, especially when I'm trying to have children.
What happens to those children now, do you think?
They'll never live a normal life, never. Just think what they're thinking when they're grown up. What happened to them when they were younger. Terrible.
What would you do if you could get your hands on the parents of those kids now?
I couldn't say it. I've been jail myself.
What would you like to see happen to them in the courts today?
Hang.
Strong words.
Sure is. For poor little children like that, it's not much, is it?
Is it true the 2-year-old weighs more than the 4-year-old?
Yes, that's correct.
The 4-year-old must be a skeleton.
He's very thin, very frail. But if I'd been tied up continually over a period of 2 years and only fed on the rare occasions and treated as he has been, I would be in the same condition as he is.
Will he ever be normal again, do you think?
I would like to think so, with the people that we have with the abilities in the field of child psychology, with a great deal of work. They'll do as best they can, and time will tell.
You say you'd like to think so, but what are your fears?
Well, I would imagine the child will have in the back of his mind, when am I going to be tied up again? And I don't know whether they'll ever be erased, considering for 2 years he's had to put up with it.
As Tim Klukas reported, it is a tragedy, and a tragedy that 90% of child abuse cases do go undetected. And it's often the case that abusing parents were once themselves abused children. That cycle must be broken. We'll take a break, and coming up next on State Affair, we look at AIDS, now in the heterosexual community, and in one particular case, a mystery, how it got there. AIDS. It's a disease that has researchers confounded and the public confused and frightened. And if you think homosexuals are the only people at risk, then this next report will be a frightening reminder that no one can be really sure of avoiding the disease. A Gold Coast mother had it confirmed last week that she has Category C AIDS, which means she carries the contagious antibodies. And she apparently had those antibodies when she gave birth to her son 10 months ago. He also has the antibodies. And despite detailed checks into blood transfusions and the woman's medical past, doctors and the health department can't explain how she got the disease. Fran Morrison reports.
Madonna Eckerman is 24. She lives on the Gold Coast. She has 2 delightful little boys and a loving husband, and she should have the whole of her life before her. Instead, this young family have been given a death sentence. Madonna and her youngest son, Anthony, just 10 months old, are the latest statistics in the grim AIDS story. 6 people died in Queensland last month from AIDS, and Madonna and Anthony bring to 279 the number of Queenslanders with Category C AIDS known to carry the deadly virus. According to the doctors, AIDS can only be contracted through blood, sex and drugs. The high-risk categories are homosexuals and bisexuals, haemophiliacs and intravenous drug users. Madonna Eckerman doesn't fit any of those categories, and yet somewhere, somehow, she's contracted the deadly disease AIDS. We first spoke to Madonna on the day that she was told that she had it, and at that stage the only explanation seemed to be a blood transfusion that she had in October last year when baby Anthony was born.
I wanted to get my father or my husband to have direct transfusion, and I was asked, coaxed out of it because it was a lot of hassle and time and money and so forth, and I was told that it was perfectly safe.
Madonna received 3 units of blood in that transfusion. When it was confirmed last week that she had contracted Category C AIDS, the blood bank immediately began to check the donors in the unlikely event that one of them had been an unidentified AIDS carrier.
The chances are non-existent from a practical point of view.
The chances of contracting AIDS through a blood transfusion now are very, very small.
Remote in the extreme. Remote in the extreme.
Now all donors sign a declaration and all blood is tested for the AIDS antibodies. Since this screening process began 18 months ago, no one has contracted AIDS through blood products. Madonna must have picked it up much earlier, perhaps even years ago, and passed it on to Anthony at birth.
When I thought that I'd got it through the blood, that was easy. I had somebody to blame it on then, but now it just, I kind of blame myself. Knowing that it was me that transmitted it to him, it's a lot harder to cope with. So far, no one's been able to tell Madonna how she got the disease. It might possibly have been through blood products she received when her first child was born nearly 7 years ago, or it may possibly have been through 2 relationships she had prior to meeting her husband Andrew 5 years ago. Either way, it seems that the AIDS virus has been in her system undetected for over 5 years.
What sort of effect has it had on your family life?
It's brought us closer I feel fairly strong about it because I know how defensive other people are, and I feel like I'm going to make my ground on it. You know, I'm not a leper or anything because I've got it. That's for sure. Kids come home with cut knees or something, I'm just going to have to be very careful. It's just a lot of little changes that we're going to have to make.
Health authorities are checking back to try to identify where Madonna picked up the virus. For a normal married woman, AIDS seems a million miles away.
What can it be, 1 in a million that we won the lottery or something like that?
Are you concerned about contracting AIDS yourself?
Oh, yeah. It's hard not to kiss your youngest son and get as much affection as possible out of him. And in the case of with Donna, well, it's sort of ruined our sex life because of it.
Officially, the chances of Madonna progressing to full-blown AIDS is only around 3%, although increasing each year. Anthony's future is not quite so bright, and he faces a higher risk of developing the disease. And as an AIDS carrier, he also faces life as an outcast.
I'm scared for my kids. You know, I don't want them to get teased or discriminated against in any way. I suppose it's only natural that they are going to a certain degree. But it's certainly not fair on them. People have just got to be a little more understanding.
The horror and revulsion of friends and neighbours is possibly the hardest thing this young family will have to deal with. That and the fear of a very uncertain future.
Fran Morrison reporting there, and let's hope that AIDS researchers around the world soon crack this 20th century medical dilemma. We'll take a break, and coming up next on State Affair, are local councils really in control of planning in their vicinity? The lesson seems to be, when you run into trouble with your local council, go see the Queensland Cabinet. The Queensland Cabinet has decided to press ahead with a development on the Gold Coast despite a row over the development site. Cabinet agreed to rezone the land after the Gold Coast City Council and the Appeals Court rejected applications by National Party supporter Sir Justin Hickey. Also, there have been 3,000 local objections to the development, and the most vehement critic of the move is the National Party member for Southport, Doug Jennings. And it's not the first time that Jennings has stood up to the might of Cabinet. This report from Gary Hardgrave.
With a stroke of the pen, this tract of land could increase in value tenfold, helped along by this confidential letter of last week from the Director of Local Government. In it, advice that the Minister for Local Government, Russ Hinds, proposes to initiate an amendment to the town planning scheme for the city of the Gold Coast by including this land in the general commercial zone. Now, the Gold Coast Council have decided to have a second look at the whole scheme and the rezoning. It's been tagged another Lindeman and thrown back into the spotlight, controversial backbencher Doug Jennings.
No, it's the job as a backbencher to, when there's a problem in a particular area, to bring that to the attention of the Cabinet.
This land near the Gold Coast Turf Club is owned by National Party supporter Sir Justin Hickey. A proposal by Sir Justin's company Geldale was subject to 3,000 objections and deemed refused, and now seemingly okayed because of Cabinet intervention. If Sir Justin Hickey's proposal goes ahead, it'll mean a multi-million-dollar boost for an already well-connected Gold Coast Turf Club, the kind of kick-along that could make this the premier provincial racecourse in Australia and bring with it plenty of big purses for its racing season. Trouble is, just to get the project off the ground could also put another nail in the coffin of a government that's prided itself on its racing industry achievement.
I leaked the document to the press.
It's an election year, and Liberal Party candidate Tim Baker is out to unseat Doug Jennings. This time he's beat him to the punch. Tim Baker says that the state government are railroading this one through. His party leader, Sir William Knox, says we've seen it all before.
Well, running over the wishes of people is not unusual for the government, and this form of arrogance is becoming part and parcel of the style of government, which is becoming rather a nuisance.
And no doubt, just like the Lindeman Island scam, the National Party views their backbencher Doug Jennings also as a nuisance. He's poo-pooing the process of Cabinet intervention. Mr Jennings, are you fighting for your political survival?
This is not a case of fighting for political survival at all. This is a case of doing a job as a member for this area down here, and when mistakes are made, letting people know in the right place that a mistake has been made.
Are you worried about all of these hints of scandal that have come out in the last 12 months and how they affect your chances to be re-elected?
Look, as far as these hints of scandal, of course, that's pretty scurrilous stuff. There's a lot of people hint at things, and it's a case of when any of these things have been substantiated.
This 10 acres of land will allow us to build the best provincial racecourse in Australia.
Alderman Dennis Pye, the Gold Coast Mayor, is far from worried that his town planning boys have been deemed superfluous by State Cabinet.
The government, in their wisdom, felt that they did not want to go through the period of objection. They wanted to get on with doing the job.
Have you worried that your neck is in the noose on this one?
It's not a case of the neck being in the noose at all. It's a case of doing a job, and the job as I see it. And I think that's one of the things that why the Premier is such a good Premier. He respects our views as backbenchers to do this particular job, and he leads us in that way, and he respects that.
Doug Jennings living up to his maverick image. We'll take a break, and coming up next on State Affair, a little boy facing death with an eloquence that is frankly staggering. Who could forget Garvin? Our report last Monday of the 11-year-old English boy with a fatal bone marrow disease brought an unprecedented response from viewers. Despite his illness, Garvin's outlook to life was disarmingly mature. He was definitely one in a million. Towards the end of his life, Garvin spent some time at a hospital for sick children near London. And while he was there, he recorded an interview with Mother Frances Dominica in which he talked openly about his illness, fully aware that he was about to die. Here now is that interview.
When you thought that you were going to die, Garvin, were you frightened?
At first I was very frightened, yes, I must admit. It was a very frightening thing.
How do you feel about it now?
Much better. I feel sort of almost as if I want to go there, because I believe that there's a life after death.
What do you believe that life is like?
I believe that life to be joyful, happy, no pain, complete suffering over and done with. Just complete joy and happiness. And I believe in a Christ, a loving Jesus. And this loving Jesus, who I love and who I think to be a very special person to me. He's a special friend to me. And he's always got his arms outstretched. I always believe he has his arms outstretched to me whenever I'm in trouble.
Do you find it hard sometimes that you're small for your age and that you're a bit handicapped?
Yes, I do. It's because mainly just other people, young children and things, I found particularly hard at first to get on with. Because they would say to me, "Really, are you 10 years old? Are you 11 years old? You can't be that age. You're only about the size of a 5-year-old. And this used to upset me at first. But then, as I grew older, I began to understand that they didn't quite understand what it was like. So I tried to explain as best I can to a young child what my illness and why I'm small. And sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. And so I still get angry sometimes. But I know I shouldn't. But it's difficult, you know?
Do you think about your illness a lot, or do you do lots of other things as well?
I try not to think about it a lot. I do a lot of things. I like to enjoy my activities like drawing and playing, and I have a tutor that comes to the house now. And I do all my special subjects with her. My favourite subject is art, and my next one is maths. I like doing maths with her, and we're actually starting a project on Italy at the moment. And we work hard, and I keep myself busy all the time. And it's just, it's very rare sometimes when I sit down to think about myself. I never really want to do it. I'm always wanting to do active things.
But when you talk to God, then you think about your illness?
I do, yes. I try to explain to him that I do thank him for what I've got, because I can walk, I can do lots of other things, which other children can't do sometimes. But it doesn't matter. I don't think it matters how handicapped you are or how sick. You always succeed in something. God gave us each a gift, and it's finding the gifts and keeping it going and practicing it each day and thanking him for it that makes it special.
What do you think happens to your body when you die?
I will leave it behind. This is only a reflection. This is only something, a sort of tag to say, this is Garvin, this is me.
So that we can recognise you?
Yes. And then the real me, that's when I die, that reflection will be faded, left behind. And the real me, that inner self me, will be out of that reflection and will go up to God.
And how do you think it will be with the people you leave behind? Will you feel very far away from them,
yes,
and separate from them, or not?
I will. It's very difficult, but I believe that Christ will look after my family, and whatever needs they need, I believe he will provide for them, and I shall always look down on them if I go before them. And I shall always look down on them and always be there. And it's like where two or more are gathered, there I am in the midst of them. And I will be there in the midst of my family. They might not see me, but I'll be there watching them, looking after them all the time.
What eloquence and what inspiration to those of us who think we've got problems. Garvin passed away in April of 1985 at a London hospice for terminally ill children, and I'm sure his inspiration continues. Looking ahead to tomorrow night's edition of State Affair, we look at the alarming rate of housebreaking and burglaries, and also the inadequacies of many house insurance policies. And now, on behalf of the State Affair team, thanks for having us at your place. Good night.
Unbelievable in all my life. I had other police around me who were extremely upset, men who have been in the police force for many, many years in tears.
Not long after this interview, Detective Senior Constable Lola Scott was herself in tears. She broke down in Penrith Court as she described the condition of the abused children for a magistrate. The surprise and horror of the police has been echoed by everyone whose lives have been touched by this case. When you found out the full details of what had been going on, how did you feel?
Bloody disgusted, I'll tell you that. I just hope they never get any kids at all. It's terrible.
Does it hurt you to think that you were next door and could have done something if you'd known?
Sure does. You just don't know.
As a father, I'm just horrified that anybody's child could be subjected to this sort of treatment. It's not the sort of treatment you would mete out to an animal, let alone a human being. And I'm just extremely annoyed and upset, not only by the physical condition of the children, but by the fact that this situation could go on for so long without anybody in the neighbourhood, without relatives, without any authority, whether they be police, youth and community services, or whoever, detecting this brutality.
The full details of the case came to light on Saturday evening when fire gutted this Warrington home. Ironically, fire, so often a killer, was on this occasion a lifesaver.
The 4-year-old was probably could thank whoever or whatever started the fire for saving his life.
Only when the ambulances arrived at hospital after the fire was the truth revealed.
Case of child abuse seen in that city. Police found 3 boys in a western suburbs house, all in an extreme state of neglect. The boys were suffering from malnutrition, gangrene, rope burns, ulcers and urine burns. Cockroaches were found in one boy's nappy when he was taken to hospital for treatment. Tim Klukas reports on the case that's shocked the nation.
I was absolutely horrified. I've never seen anything so